So this session is going to be about climate change and renewable energy. So our panel will also have a chance to answer questions at the end of the session. So first we're going to hear from Tim Rumage. He's going to represent the shrinking timeline for global warming. And Tim is a coordinator, developer, and professor of environmental studies at Ringling College of Design, where he teaches courses on green buildings, sustainability, creating ecological cities, applied environmental design, and environmental ethics. After Tim, we'll hear from Christine Quigley about Drawdown, local climate solutions. And Christine works with the Science and Environment Council at the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program. She has an interdisciplinary background in environmental science and management with experience in startup consulting and community outreach. Then we're going to hear from Sean Sellers, who's going to discuss grassroots efforts for renewable energy. And Sean is a volunteer chair of the Sarasota Climate Justice Coalition. And the coalition comprises more than 15 community, faith, and student groups working together to foster resiliency, promote a just and equitable transition to a low-carbon society. The coalition has been a driving force behind the Ready for 100 renewable energy campaign in the city of Sarasota. And finally, we're going to hear from Julia Herbst, who will tell us about solar solutions. And Julia serves as a co-op coordinator in the Gulf Coast of Florida for Solar United Neighbors, a DC-based nonprofit dedicated to expanding rooftop solar. She facilitates regional solar co-ops, a community-driven initiative helping people make informed decisions about going solar through a group process. First off, let's get to our first speaker. Tim Rumage, come on up. Let's give Tim a hand. Your clicker is right there, the right button. And there's a screen here you can look at too.
Okay, and the magic pointer is that thing right there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. I point and nothing happens. Where am I pointing?
We're good.
Okay, great. As we all know, there is only one planet. We're all in this together, so the solutions have to be sort of scale to that size. And it says the environment could be humanity's greatest friend, or poorly managed, it's going to be our most implacable foe. The issues that we're going to talk about here for a little bit are, what is the kind of world we are currently creating? That kind of world that we want, but what's the one we're currently making at the moment? Recently, the IPCC, the International Panel for Climate Change, released a special report talking about the fact that we have to try to hold climate temperature up to 1.5 degrees centigrade as sort of the maximum rise. To do that, their estimate is we need to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030, and then start heading towards carbon neutral. You would have thought that at the climate conference in Paris, when they came up with the climate agreement, they would have thought about this. They talked about it. These were the numbers that they wanted. But if you actually look at the agreement that was signed in Paris, the actual proposals put forth ended up sending us to a 3.3 Celsius rise, and business as usual takes us to about a 4.2, and actually the current estimate with rise in carbon dioxide is that current business takes us to 5 degrees in a relatively short period of time. So, we've really sort of, as heard, overshot the mark as to what's going on with the type of emissions we can have. And essentially, the last time we had this much carbon dioxide, this many greenhouse gases trapped in the atmosphere, we were looking at temperature rises of about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, and water being about 10 to 20 meters higher. And that's where we're going. We're going to get to the temperatures first. It takes a long time to melt ice, so the ice will delay, fortunately. But this is sort of where we are currently headed at the moment. We're likely to hit the 1.5 mark fairly soon, unless we really start taking some fairly drastic steps. These are some current climate predictions for what the rise in temperature will be in different parts of the world by 2050, just at the current rate at which we are going. And you will see that all of them are above the 1.5, and basically 99% of them are above 2, which is fairly problematic. So we are on this cusp right now. And one of the things that this leads to is what's referred to as climate separation. where basically your future climate is so much hotter than your previous climate that in your future climate, the coldest year will still be warmer than the hottest year of your current climate. That shifts everything that you can do. That shifts your food supply, that shifts your water supply, it shifts everything that you're dealing with. And if you want to talk about this in sort of economic terms, what we're looking at here in the US is if we slow this down, we can only lose about $280 billion a year. If we let it run rampant at the moment, we're looking at about $500 billion a year in loss. Last year, we did $306 billion in losses due to climate events. And so, this has a real impact on the economy. This is not an environmental issue. Okay, that's really the baseline here. This is not an environmental issue anymore. This is a social issue, it's an economic issue, it's a political issue, it's an environmental issue, but it is all of those things. So as you're looking for ways to talk to people, there are lots of avenues because there isn't anything that's not going to get touched by this. And the other thing is that the scientists finally come out and said, it's humans. Let's stop whether or not we can stop that dance. It's humans. Live with it or not, like it or not, it's humans. Let's move on. And so we really are sort of both the problem and the solution, but the issue is sort of we don't see ourselves that way. None of the climate problems became big suddenly. They were all cumulative over all the things we did for years and years and years and years and years. And that's the way, to a certain extent, we're going to be able to reverse this stuff. Everything we do happens to matter. And the changes are going to be long term. I'll flash some report titles up here in a little bit, but basically every report that comes out says the one before me completely underestimated what was going to happen, is sort of the general trend in these reports at the moment. Don't read this, there's no good news there. So we'll just skip it and move on. The really important thing is that the more recent reports talk about how much faster all the changes are going to take place. We don't use 2100 in most of the projections anymore. We're looking at 2040, 2050, 2060, relatively near-term events and relatively severe. And after the climate accord was signed, we still went out and for the last couple of years have put in more carbon dioxide than we ever did before. And we've increased the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We've slowed down the Gulf Stream. We managed to do all kinds of things since signing that report. We're also in some places making it too hot for people to be able to work outside and too hot for people to live in certain parts of the world. And if you think we have an immigration concern now, imagine what happens when you just make part of the world just too hot for people to be there. And the UN says, as they're looking at their targets, if we don't make our swap, we're looking at $14 trillion worth of damage globally. Okay? This is an economic issue. Okay? This is a fact I came across the other day, which I thought was pretty wild, that the extra heat we catch on a daily basis is the equivalent of dropping 400,000 bombs, the size of the one we dropped on Hiroshima, every day. Okay? Nobody in their right mind would do that, and yet we do it every day because we don't see the scale. Okay? And our children are going to be impacted by this, and also they're the ones who are going to ask us more and more questions about it. But keep in mind, the scientific conversation about this has been going on for over 190 years about global warming. The public information, public discussion has been going on for over 100 years at this point. The Bell Telephone Hour in 1958 did a whole thing on climate change. The petroleum industry was told at their 100th anniversary that they were causing these problems and decided to hide that information. The 2 degrees Celsius motto that everybody's looking at, there's actually an economic forecast that if you get above 2 degrees, that would be bad for the economy, and that's what that was all about. The Stern report also talked about the economic issues, and I'm going to jump real fast because apparently the clock is going much faster than I am. So, as I said, this is an impact on everybody and everything. And first, what's really happened is we've used the past as the model. We haven't asked what do we want the world to be. We asked, what was the world that we had? And let's just sort of scooch forward from there. We haven't done this with a direction, and that's really what we need. So to do the reductions that are being looked at, the idea is that it's going to cost about 2.5% of global GDP, which most people have said is just too expensive. It's ridiculous. There's no way to spend that much money to do this. On the other hand, if you actually look at a report from the International Monetary Fund, what you find out is that we're actually spending 2.5% of our global domestic product on supporting all the things that cause the harm. Okay? So why do that? You know, why not swap the money from doing the bad stuff to doing the good stuff? And so, you know, if we go really bad, sea level comes up by 8 feet. And it isn't that it waits till 2100. 8 feet will arrive sooner. It just gets more frequent until it finally just stabilizes out at 8 feet. And again, the World Economic Forum has been looking at environmental issues as the major contributor to all environmental risks for about the last 10 years now in their annual reports. In this year, in this season of the year, the person to really remember in the story of Christmas is Marley's ghost. You know, he's the one who's got the right mix of things that, you know, it's not just my business, but it is all the other things that I'm supposed to do as a human being that I need to take into account to make these changes work. And now I'm just going to say a couple more things. To end this stuff, yeah, we got to pretty much end fossil fuel use. We got to do some different behaviors. We got to reduce the amount of fertilizer we use in agriculture, go organic and things along that line. But big thing is there's no transition to fossil fuels, okay? You can't transition from fossil fuels to solar. They are in completely different paradigms. You think in a fossil fuel world setup, or you think in the new setup, but you're not going to jump from one to the other. The fossil fuel is extractive, it's inefficient, it provides, you know, heat, not energy, it's wasteful, you know. I know my time is up, but 66% of the energy we generate never gets used. It's all lost in transition, okay? And so, you know, why do you want to keep supporting something that is 66% inefficient, okay? So, and also, when we go solar, we need to do it local, not faraway farms. We don't want to lose more habitat to solar farms. And we can make changes pretty fast when we really want to. New York went from horses to cars in 13 years. You know, Roosevelt gave us huge plans for how much armament we're going to have to make when we entered World War II. We had no capacity to do that, and we met those goals and exceeded them. It took us less than 11 years from creating NASA to land on the moon. You know, when we want to do stuff, we can do it. We just need to make the commitment. And that's really the issue is, are we going to make the commission? This is a will we question, not a can we question. Will we do this? Okay. Thank you very much.
Tim, thank you so much. Tim, if you wouldn't mind sitting down on the side of the stage over there.